Look at this, folks. We are kicking off the week with Erika Brown once again coming to us from her cricket office in downtown Manchester by the Sea. Hello, Erika.
Oh yeah, life is good here. Life is good.
Yeah, nice and cozy in there today, too. I like you have warm lighting all around, and you're bathed in angelic light, Erika.
Well, that's like I think I have a see, I have a desk lamp, but
Yeah,
I like it. It's like that beautiful glow.
there's the halo. Yep, perfect, fitting. So, all right, let's start off right off the bat with the latest news from the latest Board of Health meeting.
Yeah, there was a public health hearing. That's really what it was
Mm,
for the Board of Health, and we haven't talked about the Board of Health in Manchester for quite a while. There was a lot of I'm not going to say drama, but a lot of activity with the Board of Health. Probably a year and a half, 2 years ago ish. We talked about it a lot. They essentially pulled the lever on independence. Boards of health can using home rule kind of in other words, they can declare independence from the Board of Selectmen, and they did so 2.5 years ago. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because, and you'll remember this name, they did it actually with the coaching of the town moderator of Manchester, who is Alan Wilson.
mm,
Alan Wilson, in his profession, spent his career, much of his career, he's an attorney and he's a trial attorney, working for the Conservation Law Foundation. And that is based out of Boston. It's kind of a New England thing, if I remember correctly. It's like a public interest law group, nonprofit, that sues on behalf of environmental causes. They've been around since the 80s. And the reason I just brought that up is because the CLF is very, now he's retired from the CLF, so he doesn't work there anymore, but he understands, and he coached Paul Affilius, who was at the time the chair of the Board of Health, to essentially assert independence so that they could work directly and with the state's Board of, Department of Public Health, and then also the Department of Environmental Protection. So there you have it. That's the
mhm.
background, because you're going to hear Alan Wilson's name again, and within this context. So zip forward, and one of the reasons why independence, and this is the last thing I'll say before I tell you what happened. Independence is important because you are able to just use the state's regulations to basically you're already the local agent for enacting things in public health, like mosquito spraying, restaurant approvals, the inspections, camp inspections, vaccines. Like, these are all things that a 5-person appointed local municipal board, or in the case of Essex, a 3-person appointed local board, they're not going to have this. They need access to real science, real health, public health things. So there you have it. Okay.
Mhm.
So the private wells. One of the things that boards of health do is they'll do a regulation, and the regulation, when we talked about it the last time, it really does have the impact of law once the Board of Health puts in a regulation. And it doesn't go for a vote to town meeting. It doesn't do anything. We got involved with this because water. They tried to do a water regulation that amounted to land use about a year and a half ago, and they got shot down for that very reason. So now what they've done is they've backtracked, and now they're doing these water regulations. So here's the one they're doing. Private wells. Does it impact very many people? Not really. I mean, honestly, Manchester has about, and they don't even know the exact number because they're kind of under the radar, these private wells that have been built or drilled onto properties, sometimes as early as the 1800s, to provide drinking water, and often they provide irrigation water for lawns. So during droughts, you'll see people having signs in their lawns saying, I can irrigate because I have a well, and I'm not actually impacting the public water supply.
Mm.
So there are about 150 wells, they think, 140, 150 wells in Manchester. 60 of them are being used for drinking water, I believe it is. And then, and none of these numbers are confirmed because they're not regulated. So we don't know. Or they're not effectively regulated. And then the rest of them are irrigation wells, or what the state calls, and I love this, this is not the case in Manchester, but there's a third category called livestock or
Oh.
agriculture, and it's for livestock.
Mhm.
So there's like 3 uses for private wells. So in any case, there's a huge animated response to this draft regulation to regulate private wells. They have things like you'll have to test your well every 10 years for E. coli and arsenic and all sorts of things. And you're going to have to now report the findings of those things. You'll have to do a benchmark first, to pay to do a benchmark, and then you'll have to report against them. And then the big controversy was around the fact that when are drought periods, and the public water people, people who get their water from town water, they have to or are asked to cut their usage. That private well owners will have to do exactly the same thing in the name of saving water, right? Nope.
Oh,
So here's the thing. I'm just going to say that I felt like I spent a lot of time on this setup, and I did it for this reason. Here's the truth. And everyone it was very animated on social media about like my rights, don't tread on me. I paid for this well, like Ronald Reagan, I paid for this microphone. I paid for this well. You can't tell me what to do with it. And by the way, this is my property and yada, yada, yada. Well, the truth is, and they also felt like it was very arbitrary that Board of Health was like overreaching. Okay, that's actually not true. This Board of Health basically took nearly its entire draft 18-page regulation for private wells. They actually got it from the Department of Environmental Protection for the state. The state's very solid, legally vetted, scientifically vetted template private well regulation that it offers any municipality that wants to use it. And there are many, many, many municipalities, probably most in Massachusetts, that use this template regulation to regulate wells. And the reason why is it's a really good idea. You don't want to build, and this regulation, by the way, the state's like 133 pages long, and it'll go through things like, don't put your well right next to your septic tank. Isn't that a good idea? Yeah. And it has a lot of protocols. For instance, one thing that was highly misunderstood, even by the fine folks of Manchester, and I think it's because the language was not as clear, but they'll solve this, is chlorination. There was a big sort of outcry about chlorination, a requirement to chlorinate your well water, and that was sort of anathema to anyone with a well. Guess what? If I had a well, that would get my attention too. Because what are you going to do? Spray chlorine all over your lawn or drink it? Things like that. So, but what it really was is there's a very long section in the state, and I would encourage anybody to go to the state's DEP and look at the sample template regulation. It's quite comprehensive. They spend a lot of time talking about chlorination. That's really about installers. It's really about anybody who does work on a well. They open up the well. And guess what? When you open up a well, you expose it to a lot of the elements, and that includes contaminants and toxins. And so it basically goes through a long protocol saying, this is how you chlorinate. And then, by the way, then you need to flush and get rid of all the chlorine. And it goes into a lot of detail, and it's really for the vendor. It's for the engineer. It's not really for the homeowner. And so that was a big thing. So get back to the real controversy though, and then we can stop, because what's going to happen is they're going to have one more public hearing in the end of March, and then they're going to vote on it. But the biggest problem came in something where the Board of Health went outside of, because you can make those regulations from the state, the sample ones, you can do whatever you want with them. You can customize them to your municipality, and you can make them more stringent in many areas. And Manchester's pretty friendly with the idea, especially on the Concom, of going further than what the state requires. As a matter of fact, they like to say, and this is unfair to the state, to be honest with you, they like to say the state doesn't go far enough. We need to go further. We need to be more rigorous about the environment. The truth is, the Department of Environmental Protection for the state of Massachusetts is filled with corridors and corridors of PhDs and scientists and engineers. They understand their stuff. They also understand what's legally appropriate. So anyway, they went further and said the drought thing. If there's a drought, you have to limit your usage on a well just like somebody else. Here's where it got tricky. Alan Wilson in particular, and this is why I brought him up in the beginning. There were like 4 or 5 people who were really passionate and very articulate in pushing back against them. Mark Weld is a very familiar board member. He's not seating on any board right now, but the last one he served on was the finance committee. He's been on a lot of boards and very, very well respected, does not have a well. And he said, listen, this is not a good idea because the future depends on the future of us being good about water supply is doing things like wells, because wells actually don't impact the water supply. Now that's an interesting concept because it really brought up whether groundwater is precious, and if it is, how does it move and how does it mingle with our public water supply and our public watershed, right? So Alan Wilson got up and he waved a letter that I had never heard of before, and I hadn't seen and wasn't on the in any part of the town's website. It's a letter from Scott Horsley, who is kind of the lauded hydrologist of Manchester. He co-wrote the definitive 170-page tome on Manchester's water supply and watershed in 1990 that everybody quotes. And so he waves a 2-page letter from Scott Horsley from October of 2023 that said, anybody outside of what the DEP calls the protected zones of a municipal's water supply. It's called Zone 1 or Zone 2. There's a Zone 3, and then that's it. Zone 3 is pretty much not, the DEP says you're pretty good if you're in Zone 3. Zones 1 and Zones 2 are really the most important things. And you have to really be careful about what you do in Zone 1 and Zones 2 because they have the impact of poisoning the public water supply. So there's contamination, and then there's the level of water, right? So Scott Horsley said, listen, for irrigation wells, if you're outside of Zone 1 or Zone 2, you're good. That is a different aquifer. It's different groundwater. It doesn't even impact our water supply, and it won't contaminate your water supply. So Alan was really, and he actually had some harsh words. He basically looked, and at the very board that he was helping not 24 months ago, right? To be independent. Now he is on the receiving end, because guess what? He's got a well that he built in 2017 that does irrigation. So suddenly he's like, hey. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But one of the things he said was, he said, quote unquote, I'm going to read this. These regulations are contrary to the town's own hydrology expert opinion. That's Scott Horsley, right? And he goes, they aren't rational. In that respect, they are arbitrary and capricious. Capricious, I had to go look that up again. I hadn't used that word in years. You know what capricious, like way up, way down. It's like, and you're like, really? So there you have it, folks. The only reason why we should think about wells, like you go, why should we even think about wells? It's only 100 people in town. Guess what? As water becomes more expensive, right? Public water. And as conservation, whether you need it or not, becomes a thing, right? Public wells, private wells might be a solution for people, and they're going to probably want to increasingly do it. I went out to dinner last week with a friend of mine, and they have a well, which who knew? I didn't know they have a well. And they were like, oh my God, what's going on with this well, thing? And I said, well, I said, I didn't, really know the details about it yet, but I was going to look it up. I said, but let me tell you something. I said, before I even cover it, I'm going to tell you that I do know that the Board of Health leans heavily on the state's template regulations. And if they do that, they're actually within bounds. They're really, this isn't them going crazy, right? I said, but I'll look into it and blah, blah, blah. He goes, well, I have a well. And he looked at me and he said, we spent $5,000 on replacing our pump last year. And he said it in a way that was like, that's a significant amount of money. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I said, I spent $3,000 in water last year, just municipal water. And he went, he suddenly was like, oh, maybe my well's really not so bad.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so there you go. In the future, but it's really interesting because so much of the debate about use and what you can build where and housing has to do about water. And it was really interesting to have the hydrologists say that groundwater is not impacted unless you're in these really tight zones. And that is something that I think perhaps in a different context, they're not going to like the fact that that's been put in writing by the experts, Right. So very interesting
stuff. Okay, so we'll look forward to the next public hearing and follow up with you on
and
that, Erika.
that takes place in March.
Okay, good, good, good. Also, you made a quick visit to our friends Shelly and Susan over at
Oh my
Essex Bird Shop
God.
Pet Supply.
Yeah, Shelly Castro and Susan Lufkin
Yeah.
at Essex Pet and Bird. And it wasn't me, although I go there all the time. It was Chris McGinn, and she's did a great job covering that. What a great story. Two sisters, and they just do a great job with their pet supply retail store in Essex. It's right next to Schooners, over by is that Eastern Ave? It's Eastern Ave,
Yes,
right?
it's Eastern Ave. Yeah.
Okay. I always confuse Eastern and Western.
No,
I'm
the
so
mill is
bad.
over there. Yeah, it's a nice little spot. Yeah.
Oh my God, the mill with oh my God, the banh mi's
Yeah.
at the mill
Good
are so
sandwiches, folks.
good.
Yep.
Yeah, anyway. But these gals have been at it for a really long time, and they just do a great job. And I'll tell you this, anything you need. I mean, Chris tells this story, and I think it was Shelley was the one who did this. Somebody had a question about some, really obscure pet food issue, like something about a chemical and da 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 da. She pulls out an old-fashioned binder, and she just has every question. If you want anything answered about pets and pet care or pet products and things, I mean, don't you find them to be, I mean, your wife is a veterinarian.
Hmm.
Like, don't you find that, Shelley and Susan are just amazing in
Yeah, I
terms of
spent a lot of time over there because I just like talking to them too.
they're
Yeah.
so much fun
Yeah.
and they're so amazing and they do a great job. And I'm going to tell you a true story, totally unprompted. I do the gift guides for the Manchester Cricket. So a lot of times we'll do things like, for the pet lover, for the this, for the that. And so I'll do them because I like to support local retail and sort of show that there's some amazing things that you can buy locally, right? So I love going to Essex Pet and Bird because they're the only game in town. What am I going to do? Gonna like some anyway. So I often for pet lovers will use them for the products that I might get. So I never talk to them about the stuff I want. It's just personal to me. If I like it, I'll put it in. So I was putting in some leashes and some really cute dog coats, like some fun stuff. Do you know that it was cheaper at Essex Pet and Bird than it was online on the internet?
Sure. Yeah.
Usually you think, oh my God, it's local, it's worth it to pay a little more.
Nope.
Now, I don't know about the rest of their products, but I'll tell you that told me a lot. And it made me say, my gosh, always go local.
Yeah. And they're one of the pillars of the community over there because,
Amazing.
rain, snow, no matter the weather, people, they gotta, and it's not even just your household pets too. There's
Oh no, they have like horse
livestock.
feed.
Yep. They grew up on a horse farm. Yeah.
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 I mean, they have the whole sections that I just go and look at like like a tourist.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome stuff. Yeah. Love them. So, okay.
Very great.
We actually have a couple big events coming up too, but Ann Plein Air is up to expanding their programming, or it seems.
Yeah, Ann Plein Air, you think of them as just, and plein air painting is, painting outside of a studio in the moment, right? That's like a thing, it's outdoor painting basically. And it's a big festival that is a whole week and a week plus, and it's a big competition that happens all over Cape Ann every October. Well, they're expanding and the last couple of years they've expanded with a partnership with Art Haven. So they've expanded in terms of just bringing in kids into the equation. So they've been expanding, and they just kicked off in Manchester last week. I think it's going to be monthly. I know it's going to be regular. I just don't know how regularly, but they're going to do their popular palette to palettes, and they kicked it off. And palette to palette means that a local plein air painter will be painting during dinner service at a local restaurant. It's very, very popular during plein air. And so they started doing it in the off season and out in the wild. So they started it last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago at 35 Beach in Manchester. It's really nice that Manchester got to sort of do the kickoffs, but it was fantastic. And people apparently had a really good time. It was really lovely. So good to them, and people should look for restaurants and go to the Cape Ann Plein Air website to find out where they're going to be next.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're going to be next, like what town, but I do know that they started off at 35 Beach, and it was really nice. It was very popular. Anyway.
And lastly, Erika, polar plunges are not for New Year's anymore.
Oh my God, that was the funniest thing. Polar plunge. Okay, Kory, have you ever done a polar plunge?
I have. I haven't liked it though.
I've done it in my mind and I didn't like it.
Yeah. You shouldn't. Yeah.
Oh my God. I'll sit off with the hot toddy on the side and watch you and cheer you on. How's
I
that?
hit all the high notes after, though, for what it's worth. Like,
I'll be the one with the beer at the Salted Cod.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, yes. But here's the thing. I love polar plunges just because they're just awesome things. I have so much respect for people who do that. And it's also become like more popular, but to me, it's a New Year's thing. Isn't that like, am I wrong there? It's like a New Year's thing, like New Year's Day. It's oh my God, let's, I don't know. Is it curative after your New Year's
I
Eve
suppose,
party?
yeah.
I guess. But I think of it as a New Year's Day thing. Go down to any public beach on a New Year's Day and you'll get people who are like, crazy guys out in the robe, the crazy people in the robes.
I just remember seeing it on the news, like the Boston news, as
That's
a kid
right.
growing up.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Exactly. And in Lynn, in Revere Beach and things like
Mhm.
that. So anyway, so here we are, February. There's 2 polar plunges this month, which I love. So the first, and they're both for kind of charity. So I love. So it's for the art and for the children. The first one is the Rocky Neck Art Colony is having their Winter Fest kind of pop up. It's a 2-day neighborhood thing over there on East Gloucester.
Yep.
And it sounds fabulous. It kind of, I know of them as doing their Valentine's Day thing. So on February 11th, they do a Valentine's Day. It's a Saturday. They're doing the Valentine's Day, art you can buy, open studios. There's like some live drawing you can like buy for $50. You can have an artist draw you, which I think is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But then at noon, polar plunge. So it's right there in the breezeway, which I think is like kind of that midway point on Rocky Neck Avenue. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only street, right? How many streets are there on Rocky?
Well, that's the main one that brings you in. Then you can go into Wonston and head
and then
down
you
towards
go
Quebec.
around. Yeah. So that's that, and that's in Rocky Neck at noon, by the way. And just go to the Rocky Neck Art Colony for any details. But then the second one is the following day, so you can like do double dip. And the next day is at Singing Beach. I think it's 3 in the afternoon. It's on Sunday, and it's for Magic Years, which is, we're going to talk about them later on, like in a couple months, because they are turning 50. It's a cooperative nursery school that's really cherished in Manchester. And cooperative means the parents have to work. The parents like run the school too, which is lovely. So they're having a polar plunge too. So there you go. I mean, it's all the rage now, this kind of cold plunge, like for, people who are like hacking, biohackers, like people trying to be that's what we used to call doing healthy things like running. Now they're doing things like ice baths and things like that. So go be healthy.
Yeah. These sound like the kind of events where these folks need support, like folks bundled up holding hot toddies, cheering them on.
That's me.
So we'll have to look into that.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, wait a minute. I got to say, Essex, the PTO, they have a polar plunge every year. And I don't know if they took this from somebody else, but one of the things that they do, which I think is brilliant. Now, they've already had theirs. Theirs was last month. But they have something where they mandate the teachers, because it's a school, it's a PTO thing. So they'll enroll teachers to, plunge in.
Mm-hmm.
And they can pay to get out of it.
That's good.
So that's a really good idea too. Like if I want a hot toddy, I'll just pay $30 and
right.
want a hot toddy. And I'm
like you're
supporting
thinking.
a big cause. Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Good stuff.
Okay.
All right. That was a great one, Erika. Great stuff as always. We'll catch up this time next week.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.